with us will be introducing shortly, and we'll go through a little introduction while I get everything up and running around here. I'll see you all in a few moments. Okay, you get the idea. Enough of that. Moving right along. So this is Never Again Live podcast, which, as we know, is hosted by Mayor Halevi Weinstein and Dr. B, that's me, hiding out in the studio down here on the right-hand corner. We're in South Texas. We like to think of South Texas as the other Lone Star State. So tonight's episode is the topic we're discussing, which is crisis on campus. Unfortunately, it seems to be a year-round event, but when schools get back started again, and colleges, universities, high schools, middle schools are all going back to school, they're getting hit hard by BDS, by Palestinian activism. You know, BDS, freedom, justice, equality, I would have to disagree with that. And we should get the D out of BDS. That's my slogan for the evening. Let's cut the D out of BDS. But they're revising history. And where we heard about revisionist history before, they're denying our very homeland. They're denying the existence of an ancestral Jewish historical state, the land of Israel. I'm not sure where they get the information from, but it's pretty obvious that it's a revisionist history because it's made up. It's by the Palestinian Youth Movement, funded by terrorist groups. BDS we know about. Rutgers last year, the Students for Justice in Palestine were calling for the defunding of Hillel. I mean, what does Hillel have directly to do with any anti-Palestinian motives? It just goes to show how far they'll go to promote anti-Semitism. Again, last year around the same time, they were protesting on college campuses. Everything about Israel is illegal. A swastika was found at the American University in Washington, D.C. Last year, at this very week, at a Canadian school, there was an anti-Semitic incident. And it's happening all over, at MIT, at Harvard, Boycott Israel, BDS, everywhere from New York to California, across Canada, and in Europe. Of course, not to mention the Middle East, but that's a story in itself. So our ancestral Jewish historical claims to the land of Israel, I mean, it's historical, regardless of how much Torah or Bible or God one believes in. We know that there was once an area called Judea, Samaria, which now somehow they got the name of the West Bank. It's not the West Bank, it's Israel. So I'll look at a modern day map of Palestine and its surrounding neighbors. So if we look at Palestine, so where is Palestine located? Well, there's Palestine and the first king of the Palestinians, Yasser Arafat, who, by the way, had billions of dollars, none of which went to the poor Palestinians, for schools, for universities. It all went to his blonde wife living in Paris. So much for making a statement and being a spokesperson for the poor Palestinians. So where's Palestine located anyway? If we take a close look at its neighboring, it's due north of Labyrinth. It's southeast of Neverland. And it's located just below and west of Oz. Narnia is close by. And of course, my favorite is Fantasia. All of these city-states show Palestine located dead center. So we have a special guest with us tonight who's going to join us almost immediately, Faye Rosenbaum. He's a distinguished professor, attorney, award-winning author, columnist, and he's the director of the Forum on Life, Culture, Society at Touro College, where they have amazing guest speakers. He's also a legal analyst for news, radio, and for television. He's written a book or two. Most recent, assuming I'm up to date. Come on, keep going. You can do it. There it goes. Saving Free Speech from Itself. So get a copy. It's on wherever good books are sold. He's going to talk about his article he had this week. But Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's right-hand marketing man, said if you tell a lie often enough, people will believe it. And that's basically what we're talking about tonight, the lies that people are believing. So White Rose Magazine, during World War II, in the heart of Nazi Germany, there were a group of college students. They made the decision to be the voice of sanity in the midst of chaos. They decided that truth needed to be expressed even as they knew the price to be paid. So on June 27th, 1942, they formed the White Rose Society. Most of them ended up being put to death. But that's paying homage to the society is White Rose Magazine, where Thayer is a regular, and he had a great article this week. So find them, White Rose Magazine. They're online. His article is The Phantom Fantasia in the Middle East. And the tagline from it is sometimes brainwashing can become so uncontested and thoroughly convincing that what's left after the spin cycle is nothing but falsehood. Albert Einstein said the world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. Please join us at not doing nothing, but being active, being proactive, fighting anti-Semitism, because only together can we fight anti-Semitism. So join us at israelnow.ca. And this is our first try. Our programs are always aired on YouTube, on Facebook Live, but now it's directly on our website, israelnow.ca. And one of the reasons is on one episode, we were actually called racists, and we were banned from YouTube. Mayor and certainly Thane might remember that. So now that we're also available on our own website, we don't have the political correctness police telling us what we can say. So without any further ado, while the whole world is going insane, in Thane we trust with Thane Rosenbaum. And of course, our host is Mayor Weinstein. I'm going to put them on the screen as soon as I can. Hang on, everybody who's watching. And there's Mayor. And furthermore, let's see if I could find Thane. And there's Thane. I'll see you guys later. Have a fun chat.
Thank you, Gary.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Gary. Good to be with everyone tonight. I'm going to ask everyone who's watching us, if you could please share this on your different social media platforms that you use, be it Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever platform you use. Share this, we'll reach a lot more people, have a stronger impact. There's a lot going on right now. The year just started, and as students are returning to campus, the BDS is on a campaign to spread the doctrine of Hamas and other terrorist organizations. At University of Toronto, they're actually offering that deny the Jewish people the right to any part of the land of Israel. There's a speaker being brought in. In fact, I said to the president of University of Toronto, excuse me, bringing their attention to a speaker coming in, Nadia Abu El Haj. She wrote her thesis. She got tenor. She flat out denies Jewish to the land of Israel, denies our history. We have no account, according to her, the Jews leaving Egypt to Mount Sinai. Also, she advocates to destroy Jewish holy sites in Israel. One example is Joseph's tomb, which even though terrorist groups were shooting at Jews who went to pray at Joseph's tomb. They went to pray at Joseph's tomb, and there was gunfire. And it's unbelievable what all these terror groups that are fighting at the Jews and destroying Jewish historical sites, they are listed by the government of Canada and by Western governments throughout the world, United States as well, as terrorist organizations. Somehow, the the administration at University of Toronto, they call this free speech. We call it incitement against Jews, and there's going to be probably, I predict, unfortunately, violence breaking out this year on campuses. The target is the Jewish extensively about this problem takes place on no different here than in the United States. Even in Australia, we found out about one of the student leaders who published an article. She's been suspended. That's good. She published an article calling for the death of Israel, and she went on video and made statements. The same thing. She's very proud of it, and she's backed by a variety of major Islamic organizations, just like these courses on campuses. Thane, what could you tell us? What's going on here?
Well, hi, Meyer. Once again, I'm thanking you and Gary for inviting me on your show. I think it's an important video cast and with a growing audience, and I always show up because I want to support what you're both doing and call attention to never again. Well, you know, it isn't as complicated as it seems, really. You know, Israel, from its very existence, has had to endure not just Arab hostility through battles, but simply the denial of existence. You know, it's a strange term of art, the denying Israel's existence. There's no other country in the world that has had to continually have to defend its existence. So to deny Jewish connection to holy sites is not surprising, because you're talking about a country that is the only country in the world that repeatedly is required to defend its very existence. You know, and although things in some ways in the United Nations have improved, it is one of those really shocking countries that commit human rights violations and genocide are never asked to defend their very existence. It's only Israel that has to continually justify its legitimacy as a state in the international community. On campus, the worst thing you can say about someone is that they're a colonialist. Everything about university life and Western culture is anti-colonial. In fact, you know, there's a good example of that, is that it's on campuses that you don't see I suspect this is also true in Canada, an enormous amount of sympathy for the death of Queen Elizabeth. In fact, the opposite you've seen. Faculty members, I think there was one in the United States who tweeted that she hoped she died in suffering, right? And so you see an attack, especially against the British Empire, because they are considered the primary colonialists. So you'll see on campus that you're not going to see a lot of tears shed for Queen Elizabeth, just the same way you don't hear much favorable news, you don't hear much favorable opinion about Winston Churchill on a campus. You know, you think one of the world's greatest leaders, the person who, you know, defended against Nazism first and foremost, very unpopular on campus because he's considered a colonialist. And so the worst thing you could say about anyone, you know, it's essentially the N-word for white people, is to call them a colonialist. And the only way to be a colonialist is to possess the land of someone else, especially if the someone else is dark-skinned. If you're possessing the land of a dark-skinned person, you are clearly, if you've stolen their land, if you've been occupying their land, you are a colonialist. And so on campus, the best way to legitimize anti-Semitism and make it almost a field of academic study is to justify it as anti-colonialism. And how do you do that? Well, you create a story. It's a lie, but most people are too ignorant to know the difference and won't look it up. It's not like it's hard to know. The historical record is available, widely available, but the story that, and what I wrote for the White Rose just a week or so ago, is that the story is that there was once a country called Palestine. And then in 1948, the Jews from other countries, Canada, United States, South Africa, Europe, of course, aided by weapons from the West, took over and stole Arab land, Palestinian land, a land that they had no historical connection to. And the only reason that was done was because Jews were schemers and because the world felt bad about the Holocaust. And so as a gift, they gave them the land of another country. Now, anyone that does even minimal amounts of reading should know that everything I just said is a lie. That's not, but that's the story on a campus. Jews stealing land that once belonged to brown-skinned people. Hence, they are colonialists without question. Jews stealing land for which they have no historical or ancestral connection, took it from another country and called it their own. The classic definition, and of course on campus, Jews are not considered a marginalized group. They're essentially in the same category as white privilege. They benefit from white privilege and they're not in any way part of a persecuted, oppressed group. And so that's really the campus, line of how to explain this, that the land-grabbing Jews stole the land that once belonged to Palestinians. What is not mentioned is that there has never been a country named Palestine, an Arab country, that since the fall of the Kingdom of Judea, which was the first state in Palestine, headed by King David, after the fall of Judea, the Kingdom of Judea, until the creation in Israel in 1948, what is the land of today, Israel and the West Bank and Gaza and Jordan, has never not been occupied. It's always been occupied. It's never been an Arab country. It was occupied by the Greeks and the Romans and the Babylonians and the Assyrians and the Ottomans and the British. And of course, between 1948 and 1967, the Jordanians and the Egyptians occupied a portion. Egypt occupied Gaza. Jordan occupied the West Bank. And no one ever used the word occupation then. But the land has never not been occupied, right? Which means that there never was an Arab country called Palestine. And there were never Arabs called Palestinians. The word comes from Romans, and they were referring to Jews. So there's a lot of fiction on campus. The fiction of Jews being colonialists, the fiction of Jews not having an ancestral connection to the Holy Land, the fiction that there was once a country called Palestine with its own governance, with its own borders, with its own currency, with its own history, political history. Nothing. They have no political, they have no currency. They've had nothing. There's no country. It's a myth. The concept of a Palestinian and who's connected to the land of Palestine is a post-1967 phenomenon. It is and now is considered sort of the majority view, but it is the governing view, and it's the only way to justify this hatred of Jews and this legitimacy of anti-Semitism. And let me just, add one, additional thought, which is that, that on campus, as you may know, certainly in the United States, the woke intersectional politics of identity creates these categories, binary categories of oppressor and oppressors, and the oppressed. And the oppressed are always dark-skinned people who are given automatic virtue, and the oppressors are always white-skinned people who are automatically guilty. So Jews obviously fall into that. They're considered white-skinned. But if you're dark-skinned, there are a lot of precautions for you on campus. There are things called safe spaces. There's protections from microaggressions and sense of endangerment. So that's how you can explain why is it on campus. For instance, Berkeley, University of California, just recently passed a student council governing resolution that is going to deny any pro-Israel speaker an audience on campus, period. Even the president of the university has objected to this new policy. Now, the reason this is considered legitimate, Mayor, is because Palestinians, because they're dark-skinned and in a woke society, they need to be given a safe space. And the only way to make them free from endangerment is to protect them from anything associated with Israel. They must be protected because they're very vulnerable. Palestinians are, and Islamists are, very vulnerable people. And we have to give them a safe space. And the only way to give them a space is to outlaw, to banish talk of Israel or talk of Zionism. But when it comes, and there's no concept of either A, the rights of Jews and their connection to Israel, or B, the academic freedom of Jews. What overrides academic freedom and rights is safe spaces and endangerment to protect Palestinians from the horror of hearing the word Israel on campus. But when the woman that you described at University of Toronto, then it gets turned around. If you want to come to campus and extol the virtues of terrorists and Hamas, if you want to come to campus and promote the killing of Jews, the destroying of Jewish historical sites and artifacts, if you want to talk about that, there's no talk of endangerment of Jews. There's no talk of safe spaces for Jews. Now, all of a sudden, you hear the words free speech and academic freedom. Now, all of a sudden, there's free speech and academic freedom when it comes to hating Jews, being anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, and spewing the dogma of Islam, of Sharia law, and terrorism. So you can see this is, really twisted, intellectually dishonest, disgracefully unacademic and illiberal concepts on campus that give safe spaces from endangerment to one group, and the other group you can promote the killing of them, and you can justify it on the basis of freedom of speech and academic freedom. But there is no freedom of speech or academic freedom when it comes to pro-Israel positions and the safety of Jews on campus. At that point, white privilege kicks in, Mayor. And if white privilege kicks in, anything you can do to a white person is legitimate. They deserve it. Now, one last thing, and then, I guess I'll be done, or you can ask some, not in Toronto.
We're loving it.
In Toronto, not in Toronto, but not in Canada, but in United States, we have Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Very important piece of the Civil Rights Act, which springs from the civil rights that were given not just to African Americans, but to other races, and also based on sex, on the basis of sex. One of them is also nationality. And Title VI says that if you are engaged in if you're engaged in discrimination against a group of people by either their race or their nationality, right? Not their religion, but their race and nationality, you are denied federal funding under the law. It's the anti-discrimination provision of Title VI under the law that would strip any entity that's receiving federal funding. And as you know, Mayor, universities receive an enormous amount of federal funding. So there is a legal, arm that's here. There are certain groups like the Brandeis Institute that's run by my friend Kenny Marcus. There are some groups that have been bringing lawsuits, but the strength of the lawsuit is based on Title VI. Why? Because the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance came up with a definition of anti-Semitism that was adopted by 33 countries, including Canada, including the United States, and including the State Department, right? Which is historically anti-Semitic in the United States. But they adopted this definition of anti-Semitism. And it has a few pieces to it that are enormously interesting. One, which is very important, Mayor, denying Jews the right to self-determination in their ancestral homeland. Denying Jews the right to self-determination under this new definition of anti-Semitism is Exhibit A, anti-Semitism. It doesn't have to be the old Christian anti-Semitism, that you can include new elements. And one element is to deny the right of self-determination to Jews in their ancestral homeland, is avowedly anti-Semitic, without question, unequivocally. So you can't claim that you can claim that you think you have academic freedom if you want academic freedom, but you could lose your federal funding. And if you're the president of a university, I would tell these academics and students to shut up, because your definition of academic freedom is going to strip us of tens of millions of dollars because you're an anti-Semite. You can hide behind the mask, the illusion that you're an academic. You're not a lab. You're a clown. You're a joke. You're nobody. You're no one without your hatred of Jews. It's the only thing you have going for you. It's the only, it's your best quality that you hate Jews. You have no other virtue. I know that stripping you of that leaves you naked because you have no other talent. But if you exercise that hatred of Jews and deny Israel Jews' self-determination, you are an anti-Semite under the law, and the university can be stripped of funding. Ready for this, Mayor? It doesn't stop there. Comparing Jews to Nazis is anti-Semitism. So when Arabs say Jews learned the lessons of the Nazis and they now are the Nazis committing ethnic cleansing against Arabs, that is anti-Semitism, Mayor, under the law, under the definition of anti-Semitism. If you compare Jews to Nazis, and secondly, if you just call Israel, thirdly, if you call Israel a racist state. Wow, everyone calls Israel a racist state. Well, under, again, 33 countries in their definition of anti-Semitism has said that calling Israel a racist state without, and calling attention to it, singling it out to derision and delegitimacy in a way that you would do to no other country, picking only one, if you're choosing only one, and calling that the racist state, then you are an anti-Semite. And so I don't know about Canada, but I would encourage all Americans who are fair-minded and free-thinking to be calling their universities where they went and said, students of justice in Palestine and the guests that they bring to campus are engaged in unequivocal acts of anti-Semitism. And a Title VI action is going to be brought against the university, and I'm going to stand behind it as an alumnus. As a Jew and an alumnus or a fair-minded person, I'm going to stand behind it against my university, because I don't want my university descending into a cesspool of hatred and bigotry. And so you're seeing this slowly emerge. University presidents are worried. Believe me, Meyer, they're very worried. They know that they have a problem because they want to say the words freedom of speech and academic freedom. But they also know that there is a double standard, that Jews are not given the same academic freedom because things that they might say or they might support endanger, through their white privilege, Muslims on campus. So they have to be silent. We can shout down pro-Israel speakers, and we can extol the virtues of terrorists. This is what's happening on campus. I hope I set it up in a clear way. It's not as complicated as it seems. I think I just set it up in a way that anyone could walk away from this and say, Thane doesn't seem like a liar to me. He seems pretty straightforward. But if you want to be ignorant and simply accept this joke, that there was a country named Palestine and Jews stole it because they had no connection to the land, and so therefore they're colonialists, well, then you've got a lot more reading to do.
Can I make a quick comment?
Thane, it's on the one hand we see.
Hang on a second.
Yes.
Okay, because I need to put some of the comments on the screen, because the CD4HR, this blatantly anti-Semitic group in Canada, is basically, they are confirming what we're saying. So let me just put one on for Thane to comment on, okay? Thane, this is from a very human rights activist group in Canada. What do you think? Anti-Semitism is a fraudulent term. We work on dismantling it while we work on dismantling the illegitimate Zionist entity. Okay, so I'd like you to comment on that.
In order to dismantle the Zionist entity, you are engaged in anti-Semitism. The very thing that you think you're achieving is not in the service of challenging anti-Semitism. It's in the spirit of promoting anti-Semitism. And it's promoting it based on some falsehood that Zionism, which again is the self-determination of the Jewish people, is somehow an illegitimate colonial enterprise. Look, there are 22 Arab states, and by any measure of statehood, they're all failed states by human rights, the rule of law, on anything you would point to and say, what would in your mind is, right, human rights, gay rights, women's rights, right, free speech, free press, free open rule of law and judicial. They're all failed states. And there's one tiny Jewish state. And that's the problem. That Jewish state is a democracy. That Jewish state recently had a Miss Israel who is an Ethiopian. That Jewish state has Muslims on its Supreme Court. That Jewish state is a haven for women and homosexuals. Men and women can attend rock concerts. Women don't have to have their heads covered. Men can hold hands. And this is the country you want eliminated. Not any of the Arab human rights violators, many of whom have strict adherence to Sharia law and believe in beheading women and dismembering, and certainly torching homosexuals and throwing them from rooftops. Those are legitimate states. But Israel somehow is the one state that is a Zionist enterprise, and by Zionist it means it cannot exist, which again, under the definitions of anti-Semitism, is just patently anti-Semitic.
A lot of people question my judgment, but I think there's always time for comic relief. So I want to make one quick commentary regarding a picture that was circulating social media about a nice little Palestinian family. And here let me get your comments on this. So here I have History of Palestine. Good evening. Take a photo of Palestinian family in 1929. Unfortunately, it's an Armenian family off the cover of a book on Armenians in the Ottoman Empire. I mean, how much more making up history can you be then? Don't they realize that with Google reverse image search, you could find where these pictures come from? Well,
the Palestinian community has been doctoring photos since the by 1967, the Arab countries pretty much realized they're not going to win a war against Israel. And they engaged in a different kind of war, which in my mind, they've done a really good job. The world of propaganda, a gullible world, a world that was largely ignorant. You can show them a photo like that and they might accept it. And so the idea of doctoring photos is, if you could write books on them and they would be laughable in the misuse and the bait and switch of photographs that have been used in order to support Palestinians by free riding on the suffering of others. Here's another one: the misuse of the words apartheid and ethnic cleansing. That is free riding on the suffering of people that actually did experience ethnic cleansing and did experience apartheid. But instead, the words have been hijacked and used falsely against Israel. the Palestinian population has doubled since the quote occupation. Doubled. Under no definition of genocide and ethnic cleansing can you double. You have to have a subtraction of your people. Before you use the words ethnic cleansing, you got to do the math. You got to do the math. You got to try hard, do the math, and you have to see the subtraction. If you are multiplied, you're not a victim of genocide. You have stolen something that has happened to the Cambodians and the Rwandans and the Armenians and, of course, the Jews and the Sudanese, but not you. It's not you. You can scream it and shriek it all you want, but it's not you. And, of course, apartheid, given what I just said about, I have nothing more to say about apartheid other than a Ethiopian woman won Miss Israel. I have nothing else to say. That is Exhibit A. You don't need anything else to say. Jews and Arabs sit on buses together, eat in restaurants together. What is the legal term of separation, which is what apartheid means? What separation are you talking about? Because it doesn't exist in Israel.
So Thane, okay, so we see this this anti-Semitism growing on campuses, in the schools, because, in my opinion, because Arabs have been moving to Western countries in large numbers, and they come from countries where anti-Semitism is a staple. They're brought up that way. Jews don't live in Muslim countries, or you might find 10 living over there. But not the
Well,
rate.
no, I
So
think
they
it's
come
really to be
Western
clear, Mayor.
countries and-
Let's be clear that nearly a million Arab Jews had to leave Arab countries after 1967. So it's very important to remember that there used to be a lot of Jews living in Arab countries, but they were forced to leave. Now, I don't see anyone talking about the right of return for Jews to Libya and Morocco and to Iran and to Iraq. I don't see Afghanistan. I don't see where the right of return exists there. There is a complete wash. Around 800,000 Palestinians, Arabs, left voluntarily, many of whom were also forced out of what is now Israel. And virtually an equal number of Jews were forced out of Arab countries. So if you're going to talk about one displacement and exile, you need to talk about the other. But anyway, go ahead. So you're saying the campus problem emerges because they come to the United States and
so
Canada.
They come from these countries, but they're raised on a staple of anti-Semitism. It's pretty normal in those countries after the treatment. And to add to what you said, Jews were forced out of the Arab prior to the emergence of the State of Israel. The Jews who lived in those countries prior to lived as second-class citizens, dhimmi status, paying a dhimmi tax. That was the status of Jews in those countries. But so we see the anti-Semitism that's happening, and you have these various Islamic organizations that they try to claim to be moderate organizations like CARE in the United States, and they justify all this BDS activity on campus that just promotes the most virulent anti-Semitism imaginable. We see it. But at the same time, while we see this anti-Semitism growing, and the threat is real, we see the emergence of Israel. That at one time, the GDP maybe $40 billion a year, something like that. Americans to Israel was represented about 10% of the GDP, but today the GDP is emerging like so strong that probably by the end of the year, the GDP of Israel is going to be about $500 billion. Not to mention what's in store for Israel with these gas lines and supplying Europe with gas and technology and et cetera, that the assistance from the United States is less than 1%. Incredible success story. So we see what's happening in diaspora with Jewish community anti-Semitism. Same time, unbelievable rise, so strong, so successful. How do you contextualize?
Mayor, I'm not hearing you've been cutting in and out just now. Gary, did you hear what Mayor said?
I'll be on in 1 second. Yeah, I heard what he said, but Mayor, try to
I'm
repeat
saying
it again.
that, on the one hand,
Fix his
the
graphics.
emergence.
No, just the end.
Okay,
just the
so
end
the
that you
emergence
said.
of
The
anti-Semitism.
question.
Well, how do you contextualize the emergence of Israel to such a strong, powerful, successful country and open country with what's going on in diaspora, that the emergence of anti-Semitism? The dichotomy is unbelievable. The Jewish life in Israel is like thriving, and over here we see the threats that exist. I'm not minimizing challenges that Israel has.
Well, I mean, look, it's an economic juggernaut and a regional superpower. So if you want to, the Palestinians forfeited 5 opportunities at statehood, which makes you think they never really wanted a state. They just didn't want the Jews to have a state. They could have had a country several different times, 5 different times. What a waste, right? What a waste, right? It's so important to you to see dead Jews that you would forfeit the opportunity to have your own state for all of these decades. In fact, just let's talk about Oslo. By the end of the Clinton administration, the Palestinians would have a state. They'd be in their 22nd year. They'd be 22 years old. What a waste. That was just the other day. Everybody remembers the end of the Oslo. So what a waste. What does that say about the Palestinian people and their sincerity about nationhood? That they would forfeit opportunities for nationhood. As Bill Clinton said, we offered 97% of what they purportedly wanted. Well, what they purportedly didn't mention is that they need dead Jews. Without dead Jews, a Palestinian homeland is not interesting, which is why they sing songs like, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That's why they sing it. It's a genocidal song. So you can almost imagine the relationship between their political failures and their sitting there watching Israel grow from, a desert to now seeing Gulf nations normalizing relationships with Israel, because they're tired of the petulance of the Palestinians. They see the Palestinians as useless. These are Muslims, fellow Muslims are looking at Palestinians and say, you don't seem like a people that are ready for nationhood. You just don't. And these people, the Jews, the Israelis, are really, we have banking interests. We have security interests is a buffer against Iran. What are you bringing to the table, Palestinians? Yes, you know how to fly kites with fire on the tail. That's great. I don't know of any Nobel Prize that will be given for burning tires and rolling it at a fence. You just don't get, there's no chemistry prize for that. And so that's the truth of the Abraham Accords. That's the dark truth, which is that the Arabs of the Persian Gulf look at the Palestinians and say, God, what a waste. You guys are not serious. You're not serious about anything other than terrorism. And we don't need more of that. And so you can almost understand the resentment. I just think it's the fault of the Palestinians, bad leadership. Their whole society, they've given up generations. And let me just say, I was for many years the literary editor of the Tikkun magazine. I have progressive bona fides. I'm no right-wing person. If you're listening to Thane Rosenbaum, you're listening to a liberal Jew. You're not listening to a right-wing Jew. You're listening to someone who used to be the literary editor for a left-wing cultural and literary magazine in the United States, Tikkun magazine. So if you're hearing this from me, they've got a problem, and that they're not owning up to it. But look, Israel is an economic miracle. I hope that its success isn't based on the fact that it's had to endure all of this, regional hostility, because one could imagine what they would have accomplished, right? What would they have accomplished had they not had to fight all these wars, had they not had to deal with terrorism?
Right.
And by the way, many years ago, in 2014, I wrote an essay for Haaretz, which, as you know, is the most left-wing magazine newspaper in the United States. But I've written for them many times. And I wrote for them in 2014, in which I said the tragedy of Gaza is that Gaza is the most valuable property that you can imagine. It's not a country at all, because all it's interested in is lobbing bombs at Israel. But they could have a Macau there. They could have a French Riviera there. Nothing stops them. There's not one Israel. There's not one Jew or Israeli that lives in Gaza. So and let me tell you something. Jews would help invest in Gaza. They would help the Arabs and the Palestinians invest to build a society for them. But they're not interested in that. And if you have to be intellectually honest about this. And unfortunately, my role has been to be honest about it. Being honest about it is unfashionable. But, again, Gaza is a very good example. You use the word occupation. There's no occupation. There's not one Jew who lives in Gaza. Yes, there are air and sea embargoes by not just Israel, but by also Egypt. Egypt is also responsible for embargoes. Why? Because Hamas shows that it's only interested in one thing: terror. And if you were interested in exporting something other than terror, you wouldn't have any embargoes. You would have people coming to visit you, and you'd have people helping to invest in your society. Anyway, Mayor, I'm going to need to jump right now. I hope this was helpful.
Incredibly helpful. Let me get one more
before you go. Question.
And then Mayor, you have the rest of the show.
Gary,
okay, what I really quickly in case all over our chat, they're telling us what anti-Semitism means. They're trying to redefine anti-Semitism as they find it fitting. So I thought that, just as a final comment from Thane before he leaves us, is here is what anti-Semitism means. Okay, the term anti-Semitism was coined in Germany by 1879. Anti-Semitism is a German term. It means, sorry, CD4HR, psycho-Jew hating anti-Semites. It doesn't mean anti-Palestinians or anti-Egyptians, right? It means anti-Jewish. That's what it means. You guys are wrong. Thane, you get the last word.
I have to admit, I'm not looking at the chat. I don't usually talk to stupid people. I'm 62 years old. I'm really accomplished. And one of the sources of accomplishment is I don't read stupid people, and I don't hear stupid. I separate myself from stupid and ignorant people. So no, I have no comment about it. It's too stupid. I think that if anyone is watching me right now who's an anti-Semite, that's the best thing that's ever happened to them. The best thing that's ever happened to them is the privilege of listening to me. I'm quite sure of it. I'm very confident that nothing better has ever happened to them than this experience. This was the closest they'll ever get to someone like me. So no, I'm not reading, I'm not following, I'm not responding. It's too dumb. I don't deal with dumb. Mayor, did you have something to?
Dane, yes, question. Palestine and Jerusalem. Is that anywhere in the Quran?
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Thanks for that one. I love that. Let me end on this. This is one of my favorite anecdotes. And if you're a fair-minded person, you should bring this up the next time you talk to someone who is anti-Zionist and pro-Palestinian. You should ask them the following question. How many times is the word Jerusalem appear in the Old Testament? How many times? The answer is 677. How many times is it listed in the Quran? Not once. Not once. Now, how is it possible that something that is so holy a sight in the mind and psychology of the Palestinian people never made it into the Quran one time? Not one time. So it makes you think, yeah, of course there is Al-Aqsa, there's the mosque, of course there's the Temple Mount. And yes, Jews have respected the worship of Muslims on those holy sites. But to somehow claim that Jerusalem is an Arab holy site and not a Jewish one is completely contradicted by the key Islamic text, the Quran itself. The Quran itself has lots to say about Mecca and Medina and has nothing to say about Jerusalem. And so, yeah, you have a very nice mosque in Jerusalem, and Israel will always protect it as a holy site of your people. But intelligent people will know that you're lying when you're talking about this being a major holy site for Arabs and not for Jews. And one last thing I can add to that is, for all the talk about Jews being, foreign to that society, in Jerusalem alone, by the 1920s, long before there was an Israel, by 1875, a majority of the people in Jerusalem were Jews. By 1825, 1830, I think Jews and Christians made up nearly 85% of all the people in Jerusalem. So yeah, of course, Arab villages all throughout Israel had Arabs in it and Jews, but Jerusalem was always dominated. It was always inhabited and dominated by Jews and also by Christians. All right, good night, gentlemen. I hope that was helpful.
Thanks a lot. We'll talk later.
Thank you very
and
much,
always
Dave. Great having
Anytime.
you. It should be great for you. Absolutely.
You too, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Shane.
Very good. That was excellent. He is so knowledgeable on the subject. He's spent just years, and I like that he doesn't pay attention to the comments on the side, because he has degree after degree after degree.
They got so upset that they started criticizing his appearance. When they ran out of things to say about his commentaries, they started making fun of how they don't like how he looks. Now, if that's not your typical Palestinian kind of fail-safe, if you don't like what they say, make fun of how they look.
So, Gary, you wanted to add something about 9/11, because that's what it is right now.
Well, I just, obviously, it needs to be mentioned that today is the anniversary of 9/11. What I found very interesting, I didn't have time to put together a graphic, but just go to it. New York Times today, their lead stories are about Ukraine. They have a lead story in the New York Times Sunday Times talking about how Orthodox Jews are hiding their taxes, right? That's in the most important thing. They don't even mention 9/11 till way down. And in fact, 9/11 wasn't only the anniversary of the worst terrorist attack on American soil, also the anniversary of Benghazi, which we were told by the administration who was in charge then, that was just a spontaneous little group of terrorists. No, it wasn't. It was a well-planned attack. It took 13 hours to control it. Many Americans died. That also is 9/11. So I think we need to pay homage to those who survived and those who helped others survive at Benghazi, as well as, don't anyone who's paying attention misconstrue this. I have nothing against Muslims or Islam or Christians or Buddhists or atheists, but I do have a lot against people who are blatantly anti-Semitic and try to redefine anti-Semitism as something it's not. So all you CD4HR anti-Semitic Jew-hating Canadians up there, come on, go look up your history and get real. And at least when you want to talk to us, we're welcome to talk. Have a sensible human intellectual debate, not a bunch of insults and hyperbole and propaganda. Mayor, as you know, I could probably go on for a lot longer than anybody out there in the audience wants to hear me speak. So I'm going to turn it over to you. And then when you're done, we're going to play Hatikva. We're going to homage to Benghazi, and we'll certainly think in our hearts about 9/11. Mayor, the rest is you, and I'll be back with Hatikva when you kind of tell me to be back on with Hatikva.
Okay, well, listen, next week, Sunday, we're going to have guests on from Israel that are involved in an organization that encourages Jews to go up to the town, to Har Bayit. As we get closer to Rosh Hashanah, the high holidays, it's very important for Jews in Israel to go up to the Temple Mount. And it's a statement, it's an article of faith. And there's a momentum right now. Many Jews are going up, especially this past year. I was seeing Jews lining up to go up to the temple. And that's what this organization that we'll have on next week, Sunday, they're going to be speaking about. So they're front and center. Shapiro, when he visited Israel a little bit more than a month ago, maybe, he went organization on a guided tour of the Temple Mount. Sensational when you get people such as Ben Shapiro that have large followings to encourage more people, more Jews especially, to go up to the Temple Mount. So there's a momentum. That's the future of the Jewish people. It's my prayer that the government of Israel and the president of Israel will visit on Rosh Hashanah to blow the shofar, which should be done on the Temple Mount. Chaim Herzog last Hanukkah lit the menorah at the Mar HaMachpelah, the Cave of the Patriarchs in Hebron, and it'll be unbelievable, powerful message for the Jewish people. The president of Israel, Chaim Herzog, went up to the Temple Mount on Rosh Hashanah and blew the shofar. That would be incredible. I don't know if that happened this time. Hopefully, God willing. I know that there's Hamas groups. They have already made statements threatening violence. If they hear any mention, Jews will blow the shofar on the Temple Mount. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. There's a momentum with Jews. Jews have faith. Israel is strong, super strong, and successful. So the future's there. But next week, the show will probably be on either 12 noon or 1 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Standard Time, because there's a 7-hour difference between Toronto time and Israel time. And I'll be going back to Israel shortly thereafter and joining my people there. But we'll still have the show, and it'll be great. It'll be unbelievable. It'll be amazing. So my message is Rosh Hashanah is coming. This time for introspection, time to look back at this past year and see what kind of contributions you made to our people, to Israel, to yourself, to better yourself as a Jew, as a human being as well, and to go forward and improve yourself. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Gary said we have a amazing Israeli anthem for the state of Israel. It's unbelievable.
Okay, so right before that, I just wanted to a quick 1-minute reminder, because as our kids here in America and Canada, all over the world, just finished summer camp. And in summer camp, they learned to swim, to play baseball, to do arts and crafts, to nature. This is what happened in summertime in the camps in Gaza. Now, we're talking about the Palestinian people. They obviously don't care much about their children. So here's a little reminder.
Destroying the future of young Palestinians. This summer, millions of children around the world will spend their days creating lifelong memories. We all know from our own experiences that summer is a magical time.
Having a little trouble with his video.
Exploration.
I think probably CD4HR is blocking it.
Meanwhile, in Gaza, Hamas summer camps are creating a dangerous reality for Palestinian children, while other children enjoy the beach, go camping, or play sports. Thousands of young Palestinians, some of them as young as 8, will participate in military drills where they will be using live ammunition. They'll learn to assemble weapons and simulate how to assassinate and kill Israeli civilians. Most disturbingly, they threaten the dreams, well-being, and the future of the next Palestinian generation. Hamas summer camps are nothing more nor less than a form of child abuse.
Okay, I think you get the picture. So we're going to play Hatikva momentarily. But before that, just do stay tuned for our future episodes because we have a lot of exciting topics. And as we're getting close to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, remember that when you go to synagogue, stop by your Judaica store while it's still open. And coming soon to Judaica shop near you, we have concealed carry tallit ban. Don't leave home without it. It's good at our synagogues, at our Jewish community centers, and it's a sad commentary, it's satire, but it's becoming sadly true that all synagogues these days require armed guards outside or concealed carry on the inside. And in the future, we'll have a special episode. It'll be join us for the lifestyles of the rich and heartless Palestinian style. These are the homes that the Palestinian leadership live in. This is no joke. You can go to Google Earth and see their homes. So, Mayor, I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to speak while I bring up Hatikva.
Okay, again, also, please get involved. Go to our website, send us a message, join us, make a contribution. Small, big, medium, any contribution helps. Our website is israelnow.ca. Get involved with us. We have a lot of work to do. And we're doing a lot. We're accomplishing a lot. Thank you.
Sorry for the tracking problems, but we're going to finish Hatikva anyway, so please bear with us, because it would hurt my feelings and hopefully yours to stop in the middle.